You've probably spent a few minutes scrolling through endless listings, wondering if any of these plasma cutters will actually let you finish a project without a second-guessing session later. I get it, you don't want to drop a few $100s on a machine that sits in the garage and gathers dust because it can't handle the steel you need to cut, or because you have to buy an extra air compressor that doubles the price tag. You're looking for something that does the job, fits your shop layout, and actually saves you time and money. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I started digging into the Ocanon Cut 45C, the first thing that stood out was the built-in air compressor. Most entry-level plasma cutters expect you to already have a separate compressor, which means extra cost, extra space, and the hassle of matching pressure ratings. The Cut 45C eliminates that variable. You hook it up to a standard outlet, the internal compressor pumps up to the required 90 psi, and you're ready to cut. In a typical small fabrication shop, that translates to one less piece of equipment to maintain and one less cable running across the floor. It also means you can set it up on a modest workbench without worrying about a bulky compressor stealing the spotlight. The cutting capacity is another practical point. The specs say 10 mm maximum thickness, which for most hobbyists and small to medium shop owners covers the sweet spot of sheet metal, automotive panels, and light structural steel. I've watched a few YouTubers slice through 3 mm mild steel and a 6 mm stainless bracket with clean, narrow kerfs, and the machine didn't struggle to maintain arc stability. That's the kind of consistency you need when you're producing dozens of parts for a custom bike frame or repairing a rusted pipe. The impressive cutting capacity claim isn't just marketing fluff, it's a real advantage when you compare it to cheaper units that start to wobble or lose precision once you push past 5 mm. User-friendliness is something you can't measure on paper, but it shows up the moment you power the thing on. The control panel is a simple rotary knob for amperage and a single push-button start/stop. There's no need to fiddle with a separate regulator or set up a separate flow meter. In my own experience, that simplicity reduces the learning curve for anyone new to plasma cutting. A beginner can set the amperage based on material thickness, fire up the built-in compressor, and start cutting within a few minutes. For seasoned welders, that means less time dialing in settings and more time getting parts done. Now, let's talk about who should actually consider buying the Cut 45C. If you run a small to medium fabrication shop, a home workshop, or you're an automotive enthusiast who frequently works on frame repairs, this machine hits a sweet spot. The integrated compressor means you won't need to allocate floor space for a separate unit, and the 10 mm cutting depth covers the majority of your day-to-day metalwork. It also shines for educators teaching metalworking basics. Students can focus on learning cut paths rather than wrestling with auxiliary equipment. On the flip side, if you're a heavy-duty industrial user who routinely slices 15 mm or thicker plate steel, you'll find the 10 mm limit restrictive. The built-in compressor, while convenient, tops out at a pressure that's adequate for most hobbyist applications but can be a bottleneck if you need a higher flow rate for continuous, thick-cut operations. In that scenario, a dedicated high-flow compressor paired with a more robust plasma torch would likely be a better investment. Also, if you already own a reliable air compressor and are looking for a pure cutting unit, you might feel the integrated compressor is an unnecessary addition that adds weight without delivering extra value. One practical weakness that shows up after a few weeks of use is the cooling system. The machine relies on a small fan to keep the torch and power electronics within safe temperatures. In a tightly sealed shop with limited ventilation, you may notice the fan working harder during long cuts, which can introduce a faint hum that's noticeable if you're recording audio for tutorials. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you plan on using the cutter for extended runs. A simple solution is to give the unit a little breathing room or add a small external exhaust fan. Just a few extra inches of clearance can make the cooling cycle much smoother. Another nuance is the torch consumables. Like any plasma cutter, the electrode and nozzle wear out over time, especially when you're cutting stainless steel or aluminum. The Cut 45C uses standard OEM consumables, which are relatively easy to source, but you'll still need to budget for replacements. The good news is the unit's design lets you swap those parts without special tools, and the user manual walks you through the process step by step. For a shop that cuts a few hundred pieces a month, the consumable cost stays within a predictable range, but if you're aiming for high-volume production, factor those ongoing expenses into your total cost of ownership. Value 4.